Greetings and welcome, colleagues from around the world. We are really very excited that you are all joining us today. Welcome to this session. It is one of the side events that is being held as part of the Association of African Universities Diaspora Conference. We've been participating for the past 2 days in the conference, and I hope some of you were able to attend the session that happened yesterday, the opening session, and then the parallel sessions that occurred. We participated in one of those and looked at the role of the diaspora in higher education and innovation in Africa. And basically, I think the message is that there needs to be action. We are very slow in our action and we need to move fast. And AAP is, of course, ready to engage as the diaspora is a priority in our strategic plan. So it gives me great pleasure today to jump into this other topic, which is of interest to us. And this is on building women research leaders from African institutions and sharing perspectives. It really hinges on the UNESCO science report that came out a couple of years ago about the low number of women scientists in Africa, where the numbers range from about 4.8% in Chad to up to about 45% in South Africa. And if we looked at our AAP consortium universities, we have a whole range, although on average, we would say it's about 30%. So the AAP has taken this up to strengthen the research capacity of early career women researchers in our consortium, building their leadership capacity so that they can become the next generation of leaders that are mentors and role models for that next generation of researchers who will then transform their institutions, their communities, and the lives in Africa. So we are very excited about this. And before I go any further, we will have interpretation. Justin, can we just show that slide so that people are aware that we will have interpretation for the entire session? And at the bottom of the webinar page, you will see the button for like a world icon sign that shows interpretation, and you can click on that for either French or English. Okay, thank you. So let me introduce myself now. My name is Jose Jackson Maleti, and I'm the co-director of the Alliance for African Partnerships at MSU at Michigan State University. And I have the pleasure today of moderating this important session. And I'm joined by a group of esteemed researchers who we will introduce at this time. Next. Our first speaker will be Professor Amma de Graaf Eikens. She's a professor of social psychology and a British Academy Global Professor at the University College London. Her research focuses on chronic illness representations, experiences, and care, and on the social, cultural, and health systems aspects of Africa's chronic, non-communicable disease burden. She's had a number of experiences, vast experiences in looking at projects in Africa and Europe, and contributed to global debates on the burden of NCDs in lower and middle income countries. Next, our next speaker is Professor Barnabas Nawangwe. He's the Vice Chancellor of Makerere University. He's had several leadership positions at Makerere prior to him becoming Vice Chancellor in 2017. He was the DVC for Finance and Administration, the Principal of the College of Engineering, Design, Art and Technology, the Dean of the Faculty of Technology, and the Head of Department of Architecture. So he comes with a range of leadership skills, and as one of the universities that are part of the Arua network, which is the research universities in Africa, we wanted to hear from them. What are you doing about gender and your women researchers as a research university? Next is Miss Millicent Liani. She's from Kenya. She's a PhD research fellow at the Center for Capacity Research at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine in the UK. Her fellowship is supported through the Developing Excellence in Leadership Training and Science in Africa, the DELTAS program. And she's leading a research study on gender equitable scientific career pathways within the Delta's funded African research institutions. She's worked at ICRISAT and ILRI, which are leading research consortium organizations. And she has a long-standing interest in gender integration in research and development work. And our final speaker is Dr. Wilore Tambura. She's an assistant professor at the University of Letters and Human Sciences of Bamako in Mali. And she works in the area of information and communication sciences. She's actually based with us here right now. Over the past year, she's been at Michigan State University, where she's in our inaugural cohort of the AAP's African Futures Early Career Researcher Program. She works in the area of communication as a tool for social change and has been working on peace building in Mali with the Residential College in the Arts and Humanities here at MSU. So welcome, colleagues. Thank you all for taking the time to share your experiences and the work that you have been doing. So just the next slide, please. Our session is really a part of a larger project on the path to research leadership in Africa that was funded by the Wellcome Trust. There was a team, this was led by a team from the organization called CRAC or VITAI, Claire Vini, Alison Mitchell, Jen Reynolds, and Emma Day had various aspects of this leading the team. And on the Africa side, there was myself, Amma, Linda, Kareem, and Harriet who participated in this project. We are all at different universities now from when we started this project, but I think that this is the first part of what we will be talking about, but also talking about how the AAP fits into this whole picture. So next slide, Justin. So as that particular project on the path to research leadership, we engaged with about 330 stakeholders from 25 countries in Africa using mixed methods, triangulation. We did a focus group, in-depth interviews, and an online survey. And what we were trying to find out is, how do scientists in Africa see their pathway to research leadership? And what we're focusing on today is how do women scientists fare in this whole picture? And what can we do to help with changing that picture? Next slide. So what did we find? Some of the leadership qualities which we have listed there are, some of the key ones. There was considerable agreement between male and female scientists that there were some important qualities for if you have a research leadership role. And these were things like vision and strategy, being a role model, coming up with new ideas and methodologies, having good interpersonal skills, and looking at the common good. And this is in fact one of the key things that you will find when we look at research leadership in Africa, is it is not just about, publishing your work in the best journal with the highest impact factor, but how can your work be used to transform communities, to transform the lives in Africa? And that is one of the key things where we see for research leaders in Africa, that is a primary component of it, of our work. So in terms of developing the next generation of research leaders, they also looked at what are some of the things that we should be looking at. So working with others, you need to be looking at building a network, achieving work-life balance. Surprisingly, this was also very important for men and women. Interesting. Building a research profile, career planning, and finding mentors and role models. These are some of the things that we probably don't do a whole lot of. The whole formalized mentorship programs in African universities seems not to be a major component of our systems yet. And this is something that we need to continue to work on so that we can strengthen the leadership components especially, and helping women researchers to advance as fast as men do. which leads me then to the next slide, which says that really the glass ceiling is still intact, meaning that men are advancing, or male researchers are advancing much faster than female researchers. And this is coming from a slightly older study that was done, but the results are still the same, that the glass ceiling exists. Women are not advancing as fast as male researchers, and we need to do something about it. So this is what our panel discussion today is going to speak to. And I'm going to have our first panelist, Professor Amma de Graft-Eikens. She's going to speak on the pathways for women research leaders in Africa, and she will draw on some of the insights from this particular project. Welcome, Amma.
Thank you very much, Jose, for inviting me to be part of this. I'm going to build on what you just talked about and draw from the research we did on path to research leadership in Africa. My role obviously was to conduct interviews and focus groups with research leaders and early career researchers in Ghana and Nigeria. But I was also tasked to conduct a scoping review of research leadership in Africa and low and middle income countries. And so in my presentation, I'm just synthesizing some of the key insights from these two activities that I was involved in. I'm also going to draw a little bit on my 10-year experience at the University of Ghana, where I combined research, teaching, mentoring, and administrative roles. And my research is in 4 parts on 1 slide. I'll focus on key problems, suggested solutions, promising models, and critical issues relating to pathways for women research leaders in Africa. Next slide, please. Thank you. So essentially, I mean, the scoping review that we conducted looked at research on various themes, what women say about, research capacity building, about their research experiences, about teaching experiences in their universities, but also the particular challenges they face trying to carve out some kind of a research career, as well as becoming research leaders. And the variety of barriers that women face, and these are multi-level barriers, as you can see on the slide. They range from the personal through relational to structural and political. I mean, the first barrier really is this idea and, the evidence of gender inequitable training, in particular disciplines like the STEM disciplines. You find that as women sort of go through training from master's to PhD to postdoc levels, women fall off. There are more men who are in the field, and then it creates sort of barriers for engagement, for inclusion, and so on. Studies revealed issues around limited institutional investment across board, but they have particular implications for women researchers across the disciplines. Women face particular competing demands, work-life balance. There's a tendency for family obligations, cultural demands to kind of feed into women's career paths. And finally, issues around culture and discrimination. Some researchers call this bureaucratic microaggressions. I mean, women face sort of silent, subtle forms of discrimination and exclusion. In South Africa, for instance, studies show how women talk about intersectional barriers. So gender, class, and race become real important intersecting problems for them. But actually, if we move beyond South Africa, we can replace race with ethnicity, where you can have the politics and power struggles around majority, minority, ethnic identities, and how this kind of spills into university politics and government. And there are particular implications for women. At UG, I had this running joke with some of my female colleagues that we would start an experiment, where at academic board meetings, we would call all the male professors uncle and brother, just to level out the auntie-sister playing field. So these are some of the issues that women sort of face, every day in universities, from the training sort of experience right through to research leadership positions. The studies outline particular solutions. So if you look at the next box, I've sort of typed out sort of four particular solutions that recur in the studies that we reviewed. Almost all the studies talk about the importance of mentoring, and this is important for women research leaders who say that they benefited from mentoring, as well as from early career researchers who believe their progress depends on mentoring, and they talk about the lack of mentoring opportunities in their universities. The second thing is networking, and typically the consensus is that the more international the networking opportunities are, the better it is for learning about how research is conducted in a variety of global sort of settings. Some studies obviously talk about institutional capacity building. I'll come back to that in the final comments. Some talk about leadership training. And in countries like South Africa, again, where the intersectional problems are very pronounced, there's, recommendations around developing intersectional policies that look at the intersection between, gender, class, race, age, for instance. Very similar to debates going on in the UK and the US in particular around diversity and inclusion in higher education for minority ethnic women. In the third box, I provide a few promising models and I basically sort of presented 6 kind of initiatives, all of which aim to support early career researchers, sometimes mid-career researchers in particular fields. I've chosen public health, social policy, and STEM. You'll find that one is presented in red peer. The peer scheme is called the Partnership for Enhanced Engagement in Research. And this is a scheme that's funded by USAID. It's one of the schemes that focuses specifically on women. So it tries to create cohorts of supervision, mentoring, sort of networks where older, advanced sort of female researchers can mentor younger early career researchers in very sort of structured ways, through writing workshops, through going away to work together and so on. The rest of the models tend to focus on equitable forms of support. So they don't focus on women exclusively, they focus on young men and women, but they're very gender kind of sensitive. WACBIP, for instance, which is a center at the University of Ghana. The full name of WACBIP is the West Africa Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens. In the interview we did for the project, we talked to the director of WACBIP, and he talked, for instance, about how they are particular about supporting young women with families. And so, for instance, if they fund a young, an early career woman to, attend a conference outside of Ghana, they fund for childcare as well. And these are very interesting kinds of initiatives, I think, that recognize the particular problems, challenges that women face. Finally, and I hope I'm doing well for time, critical issues. The first issue really is institutionalizing the models. I mean, all these models that I've shown, they're promising, they're well-funded, they're long-term, which is important, but they are kind of dependent on external funding streams and cycles. So when you're thinking about the long-term sort of nature of building research capacity, building the skills necessary for leadership, you want to have an institutionalized approach to this kind of endeavor. So how do we sort of translate these models, into university-wide policies that then kind of shape research careers over a long period of time? The second critical issue, is financing. Again, the models are funded largely by European American funders. Quite apart from South Africa, you very rarely have African governments actually investing in higher education, research, training, capacity building. So again, how do we sort of move beyond these sort of piecemeal, university center, research NGO type kinds of approaches to actually building capacity at university level and multi-level competence. Throughout the studies and in the qualitative research that we did, there is this sense, both by research leaders, women research leaders, and early career researchers, that to be a research leader requires multi-level competence. You need to know your strengths and limitations. You need to know your field. You need to develop a strong track record of research, excellence, but you also need to understand and negotiate the complexities of institutional funding and political structures. So you need to kind of understand all of these things, but also perhaps recognize your limitations and know when you bring other people on board. So very complex skill sets required for research leaderships. Some of this can be taught. A lot of it comes through experience. So it moves us to think about long-term models rather than short-term kind of, plaster on a wound type of approach. And finally, supporting cohort pathways. I say this because often you find that, perhaps if you look at the Carter program or ADDF, you find that these are built around sort of cohorts. So you have cohorts of, early career researchers in public health, for instance, coming together from different universities and learning together over a number of years. That's the kind of model that we need, quite apart from the fact that, a PhD experience or graduate training is a very lonely experience. Often the loneliness translates into lonely careers, particularly for women. So having more group-based, cohort-based models, I think would be an important way to go. So I'll end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amma. I'm not going to to review what you've said. In the interest of time, I'd like us to have more time spent with the question and answer session. So I'm going to go to the next speaker, who is Professor Barnabas Nawangwe, and he will speak on an overview of the gender terrain at Makerere University. As I mentioned to all of you, Makerere University is one of the African research universities, and we would like to see what are they doing that's different, if they're doing anything different, which I think they are, and he's going to share those things with us. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much. I have already been introduced. I'm Vice Chancellor of Makerere University, and I'm going to share our experiences on the gender terrain at Makerere and what we have done to try and change the situation, which was definitely not very good some years back. So if we can move on to the next slide. Yes, just before, in the late 90s, the Senate at Makerere University decided that we needed to do something about the gender terrain because the enrollment of women was extremely low. I think the average was less than 20% of the total enrollment. And in some units, like in engineering, there were basically no women, and it was an all-men thing, and we thought that was not acceptable. So we started working on this, and we introduced the gender mainstreaming division. We created a specific unit within the university to try and handle the issue of the gender terrain. The unit started off very well, and they had a situation analysis of the gender terrain. Between 2000 and 2004, of course, some things had already happened. We had come up with a policy on mainstreaming gender. And one of the things that we did in order to increase the enrollment of women was to introduce a policy on what we call the 1.5 points, where we added 1.5 points for every girl who qualified to come to university in order to be a little bit more competitive. And this was because we realized that as a university that the women face a lot of hurdles, and they are disadvantaged in very many ways. especially in the rural settings where after school, say in the primary school, the girls have to go to fetch water, they have to fetch firewood, while the boy might be having an opportunity to do some kind of revision. So we realized that there's no way the women could really compete with the men in such circumstances. So we did a situation analysis in 2004, and we realized that the situation was still not very good. And in 2006, we came up with the several policies, and particularly the policy on against sexual harassment. Because by that time, the numbers of women had actually started increasing. And we then started seeing some kind of problems with the attitudes of the lecturers towards the women students, and we started getting instances of sexual harassment. So we had to come up with policies to try and control this. In 2009, then we came up with the Mackay University Gender Equality Policy. That's what we called it. And this one basically wanted to make all sectors. And the policy also required that all our programs should be engendered. And so we started engendering all our programs and creating awareness among the members of staff and also the student body. This unit, the gender mainstreaming division, was then elevated to a directorate. It's one of the main of the 8 directorates that actually are responsible for the administration. So the council actually appreciated the importance of mainstreaming gender in the university, and that's why this unit was elevated to a directorate. Could we have the next slide? So the main strategic focus of this gender, the gender equality policy was to promote gender responsive university curricula. As I said, we now had to engender all the curricula and remove, as you may wish, to remove all kinds of prejudices and the instances of discrimination within the curricula. And so the unit, we had also already created actually a department of gender and women studies, which eventually grew into a school, a complete school. So the policy and the focus was also to provide a secure environment for staff, students, and other stakeholders, and particularly women. It sought to have gender balance in student enrollment, retention, and also to improve performance, especially of the women. It sought to have gender balance in staff recruitment, training, and the excuse me, promotion and recognition, and also to promote and increase women's participation in decision making. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yes. The areas addressed included the creating an organization culture that is gender responsive, creating gender responsive networks and partnerships, promotion of gender responsive research and innovations, resource mobilization and gender budgeting, and enhancing gender responsive welfare for staff and students. Some of the things that we did was, of course, to try and promote, for example, gender budgeting. Because of what we were doing at the university, these actually then became national policies. So they introduced now what is now known as gender budgeting, because if you are not if your budget is not approved as a gender sensitive, then it is not even passed at the national policy. So the university, in a way, actually led to a total transformation in the way the whole country was being run. So we were also doing specific, interventions to improve the funding for women in education and also in research, and having specialized programs. And some of our funders then took this on, and they started funding programs specifically to support women in research and also in higher education. And these include organizations like the Carnegie Corporation of New York and the Rockefeller Foundation, as well as the CEDA and the NORAD. Next, please. This diagram shows the terrain and some of the effects of the policies that we put in place. So even already by 2012, you could see that the enrollment of women in graduate programs was had improved tremendously. If I say that before we introduced this policy, we had less than 20% enrollment, even in undergraduate programs. Then at graduate programs, there were basically no women. The few women that we were recruiting had all mostly been trained abroad. But by 2012, the policy had already taken effect, and you can see that in the masters, it was quite a good statistics, and the PhDs were still not as good as said the masters, but this was coming from a position where maybe in the past we actually had none at all, but things started moving in the right direction. Next, please. This table shows the gender situation in the staff development. Now, staff development is where we are training members of staff for higher degrees. And you can see that the situation is not really that very bad, because after the training, then that's when these people are recruited into the positions that are shown. And for all the areas, it is more than 30%. And I think that is for gender policy purposes, that is above the international recommended threshold. This has been improving all the time, and I believe that the latest statistics could probably be slightly better than this, moving towards the 40%. Next, please. This table here shows the gender terrain. As far as the faculty is concerned, we are not quite there where we think we should be. But I think if I remember the decisions that we took at that time and the situation, what it was, I think it is better than what we ever expected ever to achieve. Because you can see in the higher echelons, it is still a little, I could say it is still disappointing. But on average, we are almost at 30%, which I think is not a bad performance. Even if among professors, we are still at 16%. When you look at senior lecturers, for example, which is quite a high position, we are approaching 40%. And I think this is quite good. It means that the policies that were put in place are actually working very well. Next, please. Yeah, so I think I have been, I hope I have been able to show you in those few slides how we have handled the issue of gender equality, which is what our policy was called when it was approved. And I haven't shown, for example, since we were concentrating here mainly in research, women in research, we can look at these, we can see these improvements because of the things we did also at the undergraduate level. By introduction of the 1.5%, we could then create a critical mass from which we could recruit the researchers at the higher level. And if in, say, in the late 90s, the enrollment of women in undergraduate programs was 20%, we now have more women than men in the university. Because we have now about 51% women and 49% men. In some programs, we are beginning to think whether we should not do reverse, affirmative action, because programs like law, basically, they are not having men, it is all women, and we are thinking what to do about that. But those policies led to creating that critical mass, as I said, and then being able to recruit the researchers at the higher level. Apart from the numbers and the policies on recruitment and enrollment, of course, we had also the policies on affirmative action as far as the research is concerned. As I said, for some of the programs that we have, a certain amount of money was put aside for women. So we would say, for example, at least 30% will go to women. There are programs which were specifically for women only. And that has really helped to advance the women in research, but also on the issues of research, because now issues around the gender are actually serious research issues at the university. And we have quite often discussed at the university together with the government and the private sector people on issues of gender. These policies have been adopted nationwide. The policies on sexual harassment have been benchmarked by the government, and that's they have come up with the national policies basing on what we have done at Makerere University. So I think I'll stop there, and if there will be any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Nawangwe. We will be moving on to the next speaker. As I mentioned before, I will not summarize because that may reduce the time that we have. I just want to remind the participants to put your questions in the Q&A section of the webinar so that we can easily access those questions at the time when we get to Q&A. So please use the Q&A for any questions. Thank you very much. And now let's move to the next speaker. And her name is Millicent Liani. She is a PhD student at, I'm just going to get right to it very quickly. She is a PhD student as part of the Deltas program. And she's going to share her insights of how early career women researchers navigate their research careers, insights from the Deltas Africa LRP program. So she's at the London School for Tropical Medicine, and we look forward to hearing her perspectives as the young voice here on the panel, one of the young voices on the panel. Thank you. Millicent. Justin, can we unmute her and get her to show her video?
Is that fine?
Yes, now we can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Okay, I was saying thank you very much and being part of this discussion, conversation. just has been introduced, I'm a PhD fellow, and my work has been involved within the Deltas Africa Research Program. If you could move through the next slide, please. So what I've been doing, the Deltas Learning Research Program, it's a program that's led by the Center for Capacity Research at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. And we work alongside the Deltas Africa, which is a health-based research capacity strengthening program that is being coordinated by the African Academy of Science. And the main aim of this holistic program is to strengthen scientific research training and building equitable career pathways for African researchers. So I've been working on these, being part of this program, and our main aim as a learning research program is to produce evidence-based learning on how to equitably develop internationally competitive and effective researchers and even research institutions on the continent. So my PhD work, or the thematic research strand that I'm leading in this on gender equitable career pathways, I'm basically mainly focusing on understanding the lived experiences of these researchers in terms of getting to understand the barriers and enablers to gender equitable scientific career pathways. And just as I mentioned, this is aimed towards providing information that can be used to develop strategies to promote equitable career pathways for them on the continent. Next slide, please. So just to mention some of the key challenges, and just even before I go into the challenges, the Deltas program itself, as it's a DFID and Wellcome Trust funded program that was initiated in 2015, the first phase 2015, which is ending this year, 2020. And in terms of trying to narrow down the gender, achieving the gender parity, it's kind of have really done well in terms of having kind of equal number of male and female fellows at all career stages. So far we have a ratio of 48 to 52, that is female to male. So in this work, I've been understanding the challenges that's faced by both male and female researchers, but for the purposes of this discussion, I'm focusing on the challenges that the early career women researchers face, and then I'll move onto how they navigate through. So some of the insights from this shows that the challenges are two-pronged in terms of the experience, of course, their own individual challenges, and some of them are also socio-cultural, and even that happens within the family and the societal context in which they are. And then moving on into the institution, the everyday experiences at their workplace, they also have the challenges that they experience. And at the family, at the individual level, it's the biggest challenge is the demands of family time versus science time, which they feel they're really living two totally different lives, which they have to kind of, switch off a button. When they get to work, they kind of have to switch off that family button and concentrate when it's time to go home and focus on their family responsibilities. As women who bear domestic and family responsibility, they have to switch on the family button. So in this case, they experience a career life imbalance, and some of them, they're limited in terms of engaging in scientific mobility. Some have had even to forfeit short-term fellowship opportunities abroad, and that basically means it's contributing for them having weaker social capital, social network, which is really useful in terms of their career progression. And also in this, they also feel they're having like very fewer female role models who've actually made up into their careers with balancing both family and science time. And what really comes out is like they barely see women who are top into senior leadership, senior position, even leadership positions who've made up. And the sentiment that comes out is that a majority of those who made that up, it's either they had to sacrifice their family for their career, and they really don't want to associate with such people as role models. So moving on to the sociocultural norms is, of course, if you're a married woman, and majority of them who are in the 30s, and this is the period at which, in terms of career expectation, in terms of career establishment, this is the time at which it happens. And this is also the period where they experience high level of interruptions because of the childbearing and family responsibilities. And some of them, they have this social expectation to follow their spouse as they develop their career, so they have to kind of take a break from their careers. And some of them experience prejudice, kind of prioritizing their career over marriage. And some, they'll get these sentiments like, oh, your eggs, that is your ovaries, will die. What are you waiting for? And some will say, oh, I need to see your child or your family before I die. So they kind of, these are the everyday experiences that they kind of undergo even as they undertake their careers. And in terms of within now experiences at their workplace, of course, the aspect of the unconducive work environment, just as the previous speakers have spoke about it. The issues of gender stereotypes are common in the workplace, and even sometimes when women are having meetings, work-related meetings, they are dubbed as if they're on gossip time. And unconscious biases still at workplace, where sometimes if you're working on a project that is a funded project that has the time limit, some of them, they kind of constantly being reminded, oh, don't get pregnant within this project cycle period. And this really bothers, especially those women who are married and who are kind of at the place where they feel they're establishing their family. And bullying, harassment, including sexual harassment and intimidation, it's happening. And for these, some of them couldn't speak much more deeper about it, because they feel that it's not something to speak about it while they are still into the fellowship program. And they say that the policies exist, but for them still it's difficult for them to just report such, and it might compromise their careers, because some of these research institutions and even universities are kind of all networked. And that means information might spill out, and in terms of progression, they might kind of lose out in terms of even where to go and even work later on in future. And of course, in terms of the workplace, lack of childcare support, these are lactation rooms, support for childcare even while they're on short-term travels. And sometimes in some institutions and mainly within the universities, there's gaps in terms of insufficient mentoring. And of course, in terms of the scientific research work, which is kindly dependent on funding, there's complaints about uncertainty with research funding. And given some of them are breadwinners, especially for those who are single, I would say single mothers, and they face this short-term contract, it doesn't really work much for them. And they just opt like, I'd rather go to the university, just be stuck at the lower level, do my teaching and just do my own side consultancy. Next slide, please. So how do they navigate all these challenges? So in terms of dealing with their own individual and societal challenges, just as I previously mentioned, some of them have opted to kind of exercise their own individual agency and just making their own informed decisions. And through this, they're defying norms around, early marriages, just listening to the voices of people back in the family, in the society, just defying that and sticking on to terms of establishing their careers. And as they do this, but they make such considerations by making trade-off. And they commonly use these metaphors of biological clock and career clock. And in this, they feel like, yes, we have this biological clock. As I say, majority of them are in the 30s. You kind of have to, some of them will they'll opt to adhere to both the biological and career clock, but such researchers end up complaining of mental slowness in terms of even producing the research outputs, and even fatigue. And some of them will opt to forfeit the biological clock, first establish their career clock, and then, yeah, they feel like my career matters other than having family and children. And for those who really focusing on biological clock, they use this metaphor, the glass ball, and the glass ball, they feel family and marriage is a glass. Once you drop it, if you're a married woman, you've dropped it forever. But a career is just like a ball, science, research. It will just keep on bouncing. So at whichever stage, it will bounce back, I'll catch it up and move on, even if you really don't progress at the same par with the men. And of course, with all these, they fail. It's all calls for sacrifice because of the time. And the sacrifice, of course, it's all about sacrifice for the long hours, given science. Science itself, it's kind of misogynistic in terms of the long working hours. So it really calls for sacrifice for you to really get into senior and leadership positions. And of course, there's the mentorship scheme that's being offered at the program, which is, most of them have alluded it to have really been useful. And these, I'll say, they're offering both career mentoring and also psychosocial mentoring, where they have this person who is advising, they're giving them support in terms of how to navigate through their career, professional career, and someone who is also listening back to their entire, I would say, the social well-being, just helping them really understand to their inner circle in terms of what they really undergo in terms of some of these individual and societal challenges. And some programs I've had in terms of the well-being, we've had the work-life discussion panels being regularly offered at workplace. Sometimes they're monthly, others they do it quarterly. And through such discussion panels where they do invite senior women who've made up into the career, into leadership position, that they've been able to juggle between family and their scientific career, just to speak to them around issues to do with time management. And it's through that they also get to learn about peer-to-peer support amongst those who are sharing the same kind of characteristics. And some programs also have these flexi work arrangements where some will are required to even work from home. And with that, some of them, even in terms of, the normal 8 to 5, the flexi arrangement just means you can come to work at the point where you feel you really have to be physically present to work. And with that, they really felt that majority of the Delta's research leaders are really pro-friendly, and hoping this is something that can actually work, continue being kind of implemented even in the future. And the program also offers the leadership development programs for such researchers. And it's through that program that they gain some of these insights about how to exercise their own individual agency. And it's also through this leadership, you find that within those programs, there's the delegation of the leadership roles where they're being involved in terms of even chairing meetings, organizing, and just being in some of those high-level platforms, including, I would say, even including myself. I've been leading this program instead of the PI who brought in the fund to lead the work on equitable career pathways. So it's kind of delegating those to the juniors, the early careers, mentoring them and holding them up to really come up and grow into this leadership. And there's the provision of childcare support for these early career researchers while they're on travel, whether it's for conferences, whether they're going for a short-term exchange program, maybe 3 or 6 months abroad. So there's subsidy for that. And of course, this is dependent on the funding, and that is catered for when they design these Delta's Africa Research Program itself. And in terms of the program, even with the travels, it's through this that they're able to, their field are being supported in terms of establishing their own career networks, and they're even able to get research collaborators through which it enables them to help them look for research funding, because in research, if you really don't have research funding, that's what I say, if you really don't have a fund, you don't have a space in the lab. The labs are like given to people who have the research fund. So if you don't have funding, that space will be reserved for someone who has funding. So it's through such networks that is helping them to kind of help them navigate through these to come to terms in terms of career progression. Just next, I don't know whether it will move into that. Yeah, so through all these, in terms of how they're even navigating, you find that mainly some of these, there are good practices that are being there are good practices that exist mainly at the program level, given the Delta's kind of it's a programmatic capacity building program. But now the challenge is that how do we institutionalize this? That to enhance like sustainability and even improve, have better equitable career outcomes, even beyond, you know, the completion of the program. So the key problem or the key question is all about institutionalization of some of these practices around how they navigate through the research careers. I'll end there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Millicent. Very good presentation. We look forward to great things from you as you move towards completion and to the next stage of your career. So we move on now to the next speaker, our last speaker, Dr. Wilore Tambura. She is going to speak about, let's see here. She's going to speak about the Alliance for African Partnership, our African Futures Scholars Early Career Researchers Program. She will speak specifically as well about her own experiences and the expectations that we had maybe the expectations of her institution, and that what she would like to see her institution do after she returns. Thank you, Wilore.
Thank you very much, Jose. Hi to everyone. So the observation is as follows, as like Jose said during her presentation. Gender disparities in higher education is a constant almost everywhere in the world, but this disparity is even more marked in the African continent. For example, in my own university, the University of Letters and Human Science of Bamako, female teachers represent 10% of the total number of teachers. And the higher you get, this number is almost from between 1 to 2% only, if you look at the lecturers and the professors in my university. So women are absent in the academic bodies, and we do not have women like women vice chancellor or women at the head of one of our departments at my university. So this situation is the main reason why the Alliance for African Partnership has created a specific program to target this issue of gender disparity in higher education in Africa. Next slide, please, Justin. So I will start by presenting the main goals of the Early Career Research Program. Then I will show through how my experience at the residential college in the arts and humanities with my two mentors, the Dean Stephen S. Keith from ARCA, and my mentor at my home institution, the Professor Maki Samake, aim at preparing me to meet these challenges upon my return in Mali. And finally, I will present some suggestions for my own institution that will allow to implement those ideas at my university, the ULSHB. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the Early Career Program established by AAC in the fall 2019 with an inaugural cohort of 8 scholars. That's our cohort. And AAC has also selected 10 scholars across its consortium institution to be the second cohort of the program in 2021. The program targets early career female researchers, ECR, from the 9 AAP member institutions to be jointly supervised by faculty members from MSU and their own institutions. The main goals of the program are as follow. First, at the personal level, the individual level, to improve research skills and knowledge through various research activities and collaboration, so as to become a scientific leader when returned to home institution. Also to develop networks so as to build bridge at national, sub-regional, and international levels. At the institutional level, the Early Career Researcher Program aims to empower human leadership in higher education, to increase the number of female researchers in management positions, so as to take more active part in solving their country challenges. Finally, at the continental level in Africa, the Early Career Research Program seeks to build the bridge between African universities and to ensure that women take more responsibility in development. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about my own experience through my work at the Residential College in the Arts and Humanities, and to show how my work aims to meet the challenges of the program. So my work this year at ARCA was designed both by my mentor at ARCA, the Dean Estes, and my mentor, my home institution, the Professor Samake, to meet with those goals. So I have been involved in various activities such as research topics in peace building. For example, through this research activity, I have been working on peace building in Mali with the Scientific Animation Without Borders, SOBO, the Malian Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, CVGR, and also the International Center of Transitional Justice through this program of peace building in Mali. And talking about teaching activities, I have been involved since the fall 2019 in teaching activities at ARCA on peace building class, reparation class, and also in a specific program with culture and language through the curriculum. And one other important part of my work, and this one was really a discovery for me, that's community engagement. I remember for the story when during my first meeting with my mentor, Dean Estes, he said, globally, your work will be divided in 3 big parts: research, teaching, and community engagement. And I say, oh, community engagement, what that means? Because for me, research, teaching, and researcher, I had to teach and I had to do my research. So it was kind of complicated or strange for me to imagine that I will be working in community engagement. And actually, this is one of I enjoy teaching and researching, but I really enjoy working in community. So this community engagement project was with the RDC, the Refugee Development of the RDC of Islam team, and we work in a project called the Young Leadership Program. And also, during last summer, I was involved in another community engagement program that this is worldwide. This is the ARCA Global Network for Community Engagement, and we work especially with South country in South America and countries in Africa like Mali, Benin, Ghana, etc.
So this was really wonderful, and we try to target the issue of how to work on community engagement during the COVID-19, for example. Another important part of my work concerns curriculum development. And in this point, we have been developed a project with 5 universities, so MSU, the College of Worcester, my university, the University of Letters and Human Science of Bamako, UCAD, that's the University, Sheikh Anta Diop University of Dakar in Senegal, and the University of Gambia. And this project called Transforming Higher Education in West Africa aims to build a bridge between French and English countries in West Africa. And because we found out that there is like a separation between countries which speak French and other countries which speak English. So we try to build a bridge between those countries. And we had a grant, AAC grant for a workshop for this project. And now we are seeking for funds to implement this project in West Africa.
And finally, one
last part of my work at ARCA is seeking for funds. That's also new for me. So we, for example, are seeking for funds for our project with, in collaboration with SOBO and the Malian Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission for financing our project for a reconciliation. And this project is basically video production project we are making with the scientific animation without borders, video animation in the topic of conflict, how to repair, reconciliation, etc. So to disseminate the work of the Malian Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission through Malian territory.
So next slide, please, Justine. So finally, my experience, and
that's also right for the experience, I think, over colleagues of my course. So the experience we have been acquired and the skills we have developed so far through working at MSU and in collaboration with our home institution wouldn't be useful for our home institution and consequently country and Africa if there is no framework developed for this
in our different countries. So I have few suggestions for my
home institution, and I know they are listening to me. So I
think that for so as to reach our goals and the early career program goals, we should have more time for doing research activities. So that means reducing teaching time and administrative work. We need more support for research activities to create a space to share our experience. I mean, we had the chance to have this experience at MSU to work, to develop networks with many people, to learn how to seek for funds, how to create new curriculum, etc. So we need to share those experiences with colleagues, etc., and maybe to involve our graduate students on those to share those experiences. And we need to implement also new ideas to improve teaching and research activity. For example, another discovery for me here, and I really like this kind of teaching, is the pragmatical pedagogy. I really discovered through teaching, working with the Dean Steve at ARCA, and also in collaboration with other colleagues from ARCA and, for example, the MSU Department of Sociology, etc. So implement those, because that is different from how I approached teaching before. So, and also we need our institution to encourage more sub-regional and international collaboration. Thank you
very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Wilore. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with the Alliance for African Partnership. I just want to mention as well that we just finished the selection for the second cohort, and we will have 10 women researchers joining us in 2021. We say January, but it is really dependent upon COVID. We expect, though, that at some point in 2021, we will have the second cohort who will be joining us. And we are really very keen on looking at different models in which we can work on this program in the future. We're going to have discussions with various partners and funding partners as well to see how can we expand the program, because I think they've had very unique experiences being here, working with a mentor at MSU and also with a mentor in their home institution. And then the next experience that they will also have going forward. So we are looking forward to you guys going back home and really creating the change that is needed. I'm glad to hear that one of the points that you mentioned is about having more time. That's always been an issue for all early career researchers. When I started my career as well, many eons ago, the whole idea about having time to do research was also there. So again, let me thank you. We're now going to go into the question and answer session. And I've received some of the questions already. Let's see if I can go through them. And some of them have names and some of them do not. So Nokotula, who I know, she has said that most programs, I'm not quite sure, she says most of the programs are maximum 2 years long. I agree that this time might not be enough. My question is, how long should they be to be effective? So I don't know if she means a postdoc program. How long should they be to be effective? Can I get perhaps, Wilore, you could perhaps tell us, do you think that this 1 year was sufficient for you to gain the kind of experiences from a research level, as well as from your, to get all that you've done? You did research, you did teaching, you did community engagement. Was 1 year enough really to get you those skills that are needed, and especially on the leadership side as well?
I think if we want, so I'm comparing the
place to be, MSU is a really great place to learn, to do research, etc. So if I look at that, I would say it is not enough. But we have also
to take into account our home institution. For me, the goal was not to stay more, but the goal is like to be aware of how you do things, how you do fundraising, how you make collaboration to work. The year here, I have been working on my network to develop collaboration, etc. So when I will be back home, I will continue to work with those people. I'm involving on different projects. I'm continuing to working on those projects, and I'm continuing to seek for other opportunities. So in this sense, I would say for me, 1 year is enough, because as I told you, in my university, we have lack of professors, and we are only in my department, we are 3 women in my department. And when I'm here, they are glad for me, because I have been trained, I acquire many skills, etc. But also, my students are also waiting for me in my home institution. So we have to be aware of the 2 cents. So that to say, for me, 1 year is a very good time, and to develop skills and to be ready to make change in our home institution.
Thank you very much, Willory. I'll move on to another question. So I'll address questions to each of the panelists as I move forward. The next question is directed to Professor Nawangwe. So one person said, thank you, Prof. Nawangwe, for sharing the university's commitment to gender equity. You've mentioned the increased numbers of women in degree programs and modest increases of women represented at higher ranks. Are there other indicators beyond the numbers and increased access that would indicate success of your policies and interventions? For example, has there been any cultural shifts within departments and units? How are you tracking these indicators? Prof. Nawangwe? So the person is looking at what are you doing besides numbers? How are you tracking, success?
Yeah, thank you very much. I believe there has been a tremendous cultural shift. Let me just say, for me, what shows that we have changed the attitudes on this subject in the university. If a few years ago, a male professor was accused of sexual harassment, people would they would not really be concerned. Sometimes maybe the men would try to even protect the male professor. Right now, if anybody is accused of sexual harassment, it provokes anger among the male professors because they really don't want to be associated with that. So I think that is a huge change in the culture of the institution. Apart from that, we can see, when I joined the university 30 years ago, there was no single woman head of department. There was no single woman dean. At that time, we did not have principals. Now, we have women who are principals, we have many women who are deans, and we have many women who are heads of department. So it has also sort of reinforced, given more confidence to women that they can be leaders and they can be very good leaders. And so I think the policy in that sense has definitely changed things. And in research, I already talked about, now we have got a whole school of gender and women studies. And we have one of our research, within our research agenda, one of the agendas is research on women and gender. And it is something that is accepted throughout the university, and very many people are studying this. And there's almost nothing you can do now in the university when you have not addressed the gender issue. It will not be approved. So there's definitely a major gender shift.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Nawangwe. Can I also ask the other panelists to remove the video so that we could see you? No, we want to see you. So Amma and Millicent, can we see you guys? Yes. So the next question is for Miss Liani. So what this person is saying is, are there ways in which the academy, that is higher education, could rethink or innovate career paths to match our realities? The norms have evolved without taking different perspectives and experiences into account. How might we change norms to reflect different ways of seeing what a successful career looks like?
Thank you very much for this question. And just as the question itself is framed, it revolves around some of the suggestions and recommendations in terms of the desired actions for change that the early researchers themselves in Africa really want to see happen, like even in the deltas and even other research capacity strengthening programs going forward. And what came out strongly is like, we are really building, coming up, increasing these, building up and strengthening researchers on the continent increasing the numbers of PhDs and postdocs, but when you look at it in terms of resources, where these researchers need to be absorbed, later on we find that the resources are constrained. And particularly within the universities, what came out for the early career researchers who are based within the university, they're like progressing to the next level, even getting into the senior lecturer and even professorate is really difficult because like it's age that matters. You find that our institutions are kindly dominated by professors who are aged and they are really holding on to their jobs. And they're like, for them to progress in such a system, unless a professor dies, there'll be no vacancy for that. You'll just be stuck at such lower levels. So one of the suggested alternative for this was like, the African Academy of Science should come up with memorandum of understanding with the African universities, and African universities are kind of research oriented, to kind of have a parallel research career pathway within the university, in that it's not everyone who is meant to follow really that linear academic career pathway, where you have to move on from senior lecturer, associate to professorate. We can still have such a career pathway, but really focus for those who, for those fellows, or for those individuals who are keen at really just focusing on the research part of their career. And this came in terms of a way of really fostering and securing the future of such researchers. And the danger, what really came out is like, if the academy doesn't lobby for such a kind of understanding or MOU with the universities, what we are going to foresee as a danger, it's brain drain, because they're being trained, getting all this knowledge, getting all these, experiences, and then they end up being kind of poached into the northern institutions. So we just have to get the institutions right in our context to really ensure that we are absorbing all these great and brilliant minds within our institutions.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Yes. A similar type of question for Professor de Graaf-Eykens. So this one asks, what practical individual level interventions would you suggest to help women navigate these barriers that you mentioned in your presentation and improve the career progression of women in academia? So it's similar to the other one, but let's look at some of those barriers.
I think, well, I'm a social psychologist, so I always talk about the individual in context. So, of course, you need your personal attributes, your love of research, your love of teaching, your ability to work with people. But, the institutional context matters, the political context matters. So I would always advocate for kind of institutional level sort of support career pathways for women. I'll give an example. Earlier on, there was a question about, is 2 years enough for training? Is a year enough for training? In the UK and the US, where postdoctoral training is ingrained into higher education, we know that you need maybe 3 years is kind of a good ideal, because then you'd have finished your PhD, you can think carefully about whether you're publishing from your PhD, you can think about whether you want to build on the PhD topic or move into another area, you can build networks and so on. I got a 1-year postdoc, but it was enough for me to kind of jumpstart my career in a way. The first thing I think African universities need is some kind of institutionalized postdoctoral training. A year at least to get people to think, to breathe a little bit, right? To think about their thesis. One of the things that I see in my field of psychology in Ghana, University of Ghana, is you have very brilliant young PhD students in psychology. Their PhDs yield very good papers, right? Really strong, conceptually robust, and all the rest of it. Then you begin to see a fall in quality, and the fall in quality happens because they didn't have time to then transition into doing really good, robust work after the PhD. They're thrown into teaching. They've got large class sizes. There's no time to think, to breathe, to do anything. So it's not, the quality of work doesn't dip because they're not good, but there's no time and there's no institutional support. So I would suggest you institutional level support, number one. So the idea I raised about cohort pathways, having groups of people who actually grow together, I think will be important. I'm a big advocate for intergenerational networks, right? So you have a group of people, maybe interdisciplinary, but you've got postdocs, you've got mid-career, you've got professors all working together on a project. And I find that that tends to help people think very clearly about what they want to do. It's also good to see an older professor struggling, right? It gives you a good sense of, the fact that it's not an easy thing. It's not easy, right, to manage an academic career. So I would go beyond the individual. I would say, let's think about psychosocial types of support structures, very encouraging group forms of support. And that way women can actually sort of navigate better, having somebody to talk to. I have mentees, early career mentees who will come into my office and they say, oh, can I talk to you for 20 minutes? And we sit there for 3 hours. But you do that because you care about them. You've built a relationship. So that's really important, I think. I hope I answered it somewhat in a rambling fashion.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. Well, we are almost about out of time. I wanted Justin to show us one more slide before we leave. I want to thank all of you for the great presentations that you've made. You've really done, gone into the insights that that were necessary to provide a review of, the gender and research disparities within the African research enterprise, for showing some of the programs that African research universities need to think about and actually putting them into action, and to really give us some insights on how we can navigate our research careers and some of the programs that are out there, like the AAP. I don't want to stress the AAP, but I will continue to talk about it. I'm going to show another slide in a minute about a program that we're going to start soon that we have launched last week. But right now, Amma has actually mentioned some of these recommendations that I have here now about really what are some of the things that we can be doing now. We want to have researchers really taking control of their careers. We want you to focusing on being accepting of being mentored. This happens quite a lot where people think that I'm just back from my PhD, I know it all, I'm not going to be listening to the older scholars, so to speak, but these are very important. Mentoring is key. Having these networks, don't forget it's the networks that are going to help you to advance your career. So focus on that as well. We want our research leaders to really remember to be also the mentors, to be willing to mentor others. Don't feel afraid that if you are sharing and working with others, with younger colleagues, that you are going to lose your own sort of expertise or whatever. I find it so disheartening when a professor retires or a professor dies and then the whole research area also dies. That's very disheartening, especially when universities have invested, huge amounts in certain research areas. I also want to think about the institutions as well, that we really need to begin to think about moving women researchers, strengthening the skills, the research skills, and some of what Prof. Nawangwe talked about, how to get gender integrated and so on. And, but also going beyond the numbers to really getting gender research, gender into research, and using data to develop new programs and using it as evidence. And of course, we recognize that a lot of what you get here is from experience. You get this whole leadership from experience, as Dr. de Graaf Eikens mentioned. but there's nothing, of course, wrong with getting a bit of training. And so many of the people, or some of the respondents in our study mentioned the African Center of Excellence for Research Leadership should be a consideration for some of our universities to think about offering this kind of research leadership training. And so this is something that has been put out there. I think there are a number of funders who are thinking about this, and we hope to see this at many institutions, because it is not something that you can put at one institution and then that solves the problem. So we look forward to the continuous training of our researchers on leadership, because sometimes you're just thrown into the whole, thrown out there and say, you lead this research team with a huge project, when in fact you really have no experience in that or even understanding of what that means. So that's some of the things of the recommendations that came from that study, and we hope that we will go through this as we move along. There's just one more slide that I'd like to share with you, a program that the Alliance for African Partnership has just launched last week. It's our Partnerships for Innovative Research in Africa grant program. So we have launched our next partner. This is our second partnerships grant program. Teams can apply for grants in any of these categories and in any of these funding tiers. So small grants up to $50,000, planning grants up to $100,000, and scaling grants up to $200,000. Gender is a very important part of this. We want to see gender in the teams. We want to see gender components being part of the research being done. But key here, where I'm looking at, is the early career researchers. This is one of the categories where we would like our scholars to think, our early career scholars to think about applying. We have upped the time limit from, typically we say 3 years post-PhD for our African Futures program, but we recognize the issues here. And so we've said 10 years post-PhD, because we know that some people who are even senior lecturers or even sometimes associate professors also need some support. So the early career researchers category is one that if we have any early career scholars on this webinar, we'd like you to think about applying. So this is one of our new programs, and we are really looking forward to all the applications and all the new partnerships that will form from this program. I'd like to now say thank you again to all of the panelists. Thank you for joining us today. Continue to stay in touch with us on our Facebook page, on our website, and as we have new programs that we develop and work with our African colleagues in the AAP consortium. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.